A Hell's Angel stopped for an unconscious female cop. What happened next changed his life. The rumble of Jake's Harley-Davidson echoed through the empty night as he cruised down Highway 23. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting silver light across the asphalt that stretched endlessly before him. The club meeting had run late, but Jake didn't mind. These solitary rides were his favorite part of any day. His leather jacket creaked as he adjusted his grip on the handlebars. The wind whipped against his face, and even through his bandana, he could smell the sweet scent of pine trees that lined both sides of the road. Out here, alone with just his thoughts and his bike, Jake felt truly free. The speedometer hovered around 60 as he leaned into a gentle curve. His headlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the yellow lines that disappeared beneath his wheels. The steady thrum of the engine vibrated through his body, as familiar as his own heartbeat. Jake's mind wandered to the meeting he'd just left. The other angels had been rowdier than usual tonight, talking big about territory disputes and showing off their newest bikes. He'd stayed quiet through most of it, nursing his cola while the others downed beer after beer. That was Jake's way. Watching, listening, keeping to himself. A deer bounded across the road ahead, and Jake easily adjusted his speed. Years of riding had honed his reflexes to razor sharpness. The animal disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the sound of rustling leaves in its wake. The highway stretched on, empty in both directions. Jake checked his mirrors out of habit. Nothing but darkness behind him. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. Perfect timing to get home, grab a shower, and catch some sleep before his early shift at the garage tomorrow. As he rounded another bend, something caught his eye. An unusual shape on the shoulder of the road about 100 yards ahead. Jake's trained eye noticed it didn't look like the usual roadside debris. He slowed slightly, squinting through the darkness. The shape became clearer as his headlight swept across it. Jake's heart jumped into his throat. There, sprawled half on the gravel shoulder and half in the grass, was a person. The reflection of his headlight glinted off something metallic, a badge. Jake immediately downshifted, the engine growling lower as he guided his bike toward the shoulder. As he got closer, he could make out more details. It was a woman in a police uniform, lying motionless on her side. Her hair had fallen across her face, and her limbs were splayed at awkward angles. His tires crunched on the gravel as he brought the bike to a stop about 20 feet away. Jake killed the engine, and suddenly, the night seemed impossibly quiet. He swung his leg over the seat, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. For a moment, he hesitated. As a Hell's Angel, he'd learned to be wary of law enforcement. They weren't exactly known for being friendly to his kind. But something about the stillness of her form, the vulnerability of her position, made his decision for him. Jake approached cautiously, his footsteps careful and measured. The woman didn't stir. As he got closer, he could see she was breathing, but her breaths were shallow and uneven. "Hey," he called out softly, not wanting to startle her if she was conscious. There was no response. Jake moved closer, his heart pounding harder with each step. The officer's uniform was dirty and scraped, and there was a small trickle of blood near her hairline. Something bad had happened here, and recently. Jake knelt beside the unconscious officer, all thoughts of personal safety forgotten, as he realized just how serious the situation might be. Jake's hands hovered uncertainly over the injured officer as he took in her condition. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The streetlight above cast just enough light for him to see a nasty bruise forming on her temple. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder, and scrapes covered her exposed skin. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Jake kept his voice gentle, not wanting to startle her. No response. He pulled out his cell phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker. 911, what's your emergency? I found an unconscious police officer on Highway 23, about 2 miles south of the Pine Creek exit. She's breathing but not responding. Looks like she might have been hit by a vehicle. Jake's voice was steady despite his racing heart. Is she bleeding anywhere? Jake carefully examined her again. Small cut on her forehead, nothing major that I can see, but she's got some nasty scrapes and bruises. Do not move her, the dispatcher instructed. Emergency services are on their way. Stay on the line with me. Jake set the phone on speaker and placed it on the ground beside him. The officer's face was pale in the moonlight, her features delicate despite the bruising. She couldn't have been much older than him. I'm going to check your pulse, ma'am, he said softly, though he knew she probably couldn't hear him. Her skin was cool as he pressed 2 fingers against her neck. The pulse was there, a bit fast, but strong. A soft moan escaped her lips. Jake leaned closer. Hey, can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered. What? She mumbled, trying to move. Don't try to get up, Jake said quickly. You're hurt. Help is coming. Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused and confused. Everything hurts, she whispered. I know. Just stay still. Without thinking, Jake reached for her hand. To his surprise, she gripped it weakly. Who? She started to ask, but her eyes closed again. I'm Jake. Found you on the side of the road. He squeezed her hand gently. What's your name? Lily, she breathed, before slipping back into unconsciousness. The dispatcher's voice came through the phone. Sir, are you still there? Yeah, she woke up for a moment. Said her name is Lily. Jake could hear sirens in the distance now, growing louder. He kept holding Lily's hand, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. Her fingers would occasionally twitch in his, and sometimes her eyes would flutter open, though she didn't speak again. The night air had grown cooler, and Jake noticed Lily shivering slightly. He shrugged off his leather jacket and carefully draped it over her, making sure not to move her. Hang in there, Lily, he murmured. Help's almost here. Her eyes opened again, clearer this time. She looked at him with confusion. Then fear. Then something else. Trust, maybe? Before consciousness slipped away once more. The sirens were very close now. Jake could see the flashing lights reflecting off the trees, getting brighter with each passing second. Still, he didn't let go of Lily's hand, anchoring her to consciousness as best he could while they waited for help to arrive. Red and blue lights painted the highway in harsh flashes as the ambulance pulled up alongside them. 2 paramedics jumped out, their movements quick and practiced. Jake reluctantly let go of Lily's hand and stepped back, giving them space to work. What happened here? One of the paramedics asked, kneeling beside Lily. Found her unconscious. Looks like she might have been hit by a car, Jake explained, running a hand through his hair. She came to for a few moments but wasn't very coherent. The paramedics worked efficiently, checking her vitals and carefully securing a neck brace. Jake watched, his leather jacket still draped over Lily's body. Something tugged at his chest as he observed their swift movements, a feeling he couldn't quite name. BP's a bit low, one paramedic called out. Possible concussion. Let's get her loaded up. They transferred Lily onto a backboard, then lifted her onto the gurney. As they raised it to its full height, Jake's jacket slipped off. He stepped forward to retrieve it, but hesitated. Keep it on her, he said. She was shivering earlier. The female paramedic nodded, tucking the jacket around Lily before they wheeled her to the ambulance. Jake stood rooted to the spot, watching as they loaded her in. The red and blue lights continued their relentless dance across the pavement, across his face, across the empty stretch of highway where he'd found her. He should leave. He'd done his part, called for help, stayed until they arrived. But something kept him there, watching the ambulance doors close with a definitive click. "Hey!" the female paramedic called out. "We're taking her to St. Mary's. If you want to follow." Jake nodded, already walking toward his bike. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing into the night, and Jake kicked his motorcycle to life, following at a respectful distance. At St. Mary's emergency department, Jake found himself pacing in the waiting room. He'd given his statement to the police officers who'd shown up, explaining how he'd found her. They'd seemed skeptical at first, a Hell's Angel helping a cop, but his story was straightforward, and there were no other witnesses to question. Time crawled by. Jake made his way to the coffee machine, got himself a cup of the bitter hospital brew. As he walked back toward the waiting area, he passed by the nurses' station. 2 nurses were speaking in hushed tones, but their words carried clearly in the quiet hallway. "Can you believe it? Senator Wheeler's daughter," one nurse whispered. "Poor thing." Jake froze mid-step, coffee forgotten in his hand. "The officer they brought in?" the other nurse asked. "That's Lily Wheeler?" "Yes, and keep your voice down. The senator's already been notified. He's on his way, and you know how he is about publicity." "Oh God, yes, especially with his anti-gang campaign. Remember that speech he gave last month? The one about cleaning up the streets and getting rid of those motorcycle gangs?" "The Hell's Angels," the first nurse nodded. "He's made them his personal crusade. Says they're everything that's wrong with this city." Jake's stomach dropped. The coffee in his hand suddenly felt ice cold. Senator Wheeler, the man who'd been trying to destroy the Hell's Angels for years, the politician who'd called them thugs and criminals at every opportunity. That was Lily's father. He looked down at his vest with its patches and insignia, suddenly very aware of who and what he was. The weight of his colors felt heavier than ever before. Jake slumped into one of the hard plastic chairs in the waiting room, his mind racing. The coffee in his hand had gone cold, untouched. Every time the emergency room doors swung open, he tensed, expecting Senator Wheeler to storm in with an army of reporters and police officers. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making the stark white walls seem even more harsh and unwelcoming. A clock on the wall ticked away the minutes with agonizing slowness. Other people in the waiting room cast occasional suspicious glances his way. A man in leather vest covered in patches wasn't exactly a common sight in a hospital waiting room. "Excuse me?" Jake approached the front desk after what felt like hours. The nurse looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "I'm wondering about Officer Wheeler's condition. I'm the one who found her." The nurse typed something into her computer. "Are you family?" "No, but—" "I'm sorry, sir. I can only share information with family members." Jake ran his fingers through his hair in frustration. "Look, I just want to know if she's okay, that's all." The nurse's expression softened slightly. "She's stable, that's all I can tell you." Relief flooded through him. At least she was alive. He returned to his seat, checking his phone. Several missed calls from his club brothers. They'd be wondering where he was, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. Not yet. A commotion at the entrance drew his attention. 2 police officers walked in, speaking in low voices with the desk nurse. Jake's heart rate picked up, but they weren't looking his way. Yet, finally, after another hour of waiting, a different nurse approached him. "Sir, Officer Wheeler is awake, and she's asking about the person who found her. Would you like to see her?" Jake stood up, his leather jacket creaking. "Yeah, thanks." He followed the nurse through the sterile corridors to a small room. Lily lay in the hospital bed, looking pale but alert. Various machines beeped steadily around her. His jacket was folded neatly on a chair beside her bed. "Hey," he said softly, hovering in the doorway. "How are you feeling?" Lily's eyes focused on him, then widened as she took in his appearance, The vest, the patches, the leather. Her hand moved slightly toward the call button. "It's okay," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I'm the one who found you on the road. Called the ambulance." She stared at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then her expression hardened. "You're a Hell's Angel." "Yes, but I remember headlights," she said, her voice gaining strength. "A motorcycle engine right before I was hit." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. "Wait, no, that wasn't me. I found you after—" "Get out!" she said, her voice cold. Her hand found the call button and pressed it firmly. "You're under arrest for attempted murder of a police officer." "You've got it wrong," Jake protested, taking a step back. "I was trying to help." The two police officers from the waiting room burst through the door, hands on their weapons. "Step away from Officer Wheeler," one commanded. Jake raised his hands slowly, his heart pounding. "This is a mistake. I didn't hit her. I was trying to help." "Tell it to the judge," Lily said weakly from the bed. "I know what I heard. I know what I saw." The officers moved forward, handcuffs ready. Jake could see in their eyes they'd already made up their minds about him. One Hell's Angel, one injured cop. To them, it was an open and shut case. "Officer Wheeler, please," Jake said, his voice steady despite the handcuffs being clicked around his wrists. "Think about this. If I had hit you, why would I stop? Why would I call an ambulance and wait with you?" Lily's face was pale against the stark hospital sheets, but her eyes burned with conviction. "To cover your tracks. Make yourself look like the hero instead of the criminal." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as one of the officers patted Jake down. His motorcycle keys jingled as they were removed from his pocket. "That's not what happened," Jake insisted. "I was riding home from a club meeting when I saw you lying there. You were drifting in and out. I held your hand, remember? Kept talking to you so you'd stay conscious?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Lily's face, but it vanished quickly. "I remember a motorcycle, the sound of it coming up behind me while I was walking my beat." "There are thousands of motorcycles in this city," Jake said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Check my bike. There won't be any damage, no paint transfer, no dents, nothing." One of the officers snorted. "Like you couldn't have fixed it already." "In 3 hours?" Jake challenged. "While I was sitting in that waiting room the whole time? Ask the nurses, I never left." Lily pressed her fingers to her temples, wincing. The heart monitor beside her bed began beeping faster. "You're just trying to confuse me. I know what I heard." "You were unconscious when I found you," Jake said softly. "You're mixing up memories. The motorcycle you heard before you were hit. That wasn't mine. I came later. I helped you." A nurse hurried into the room, frowning at the monitors. "Officer Wheeler's blood pressure is spiking. She needs rest." "Just 1 more minute," Lily insisted, though her voice was getting weaker. "You're Hell's Angels. My father warned me about your kind. You stick together, protect your own no matter what." "Is that what you really believe?" Jake asked. "Or is that what your father told you to believe?" Lily's eyes flashed with anger, but before she could respond, the nurse stepped between them. "That's enough. Officer Wheeler needs to rest now." She pressed a button on one of the IV machines. "Wait," Lily protested, but her eyes were already growing heavy. "I need to... Jake watched as she slipped into a medicated sleep, his chest tight with frustration and something else, disappointment maybe. He'd thought, during those moments on the roadside, when he'd held her hand and talked to her about nothing and everything just to keep her conscious, that they'd formed some kind of connection. Now that connection lay shattered on the hospital room floor. "Let's go," one of the officers said, tugging at Jake's arm. As they led him from the room, Jake looked back at Lily's sleeping form. The tough cop who'd accused him and the vulnerable woman he'd found on the roadside. They seemed like 2 different people. Somewhere between those 2 versions of her lay the truth. and he was going to have to find it. The officers marched him down the corridor, past the curious stares of hospital staff and visitors. Jake walked with his head high, despite the handcuffs. He knew what everyone was thinking. Just another criminal biker, getting what he deserved. But they were wrong. He'd done the right thing, and somehow he was going to prove it. For now, though, all he could do was cooperate and hope that the truth would come out. His good deed had turned into a nightmare, but he couldn't bring himself to regret stopping to help. Someone had tried to kill Lily Wheeler, and it wasn't him. The question was, who had it been? And why were they letting him take the fall? The holding cell was cold and empty, just like Jake's chances of getting out of this mess. He sat on the hard metal bench, his back against the concrete wall, thinking about Senator Wheeler's face plastered across campaign billboards all over the city. The man's steel-gray hair and practiced smile had become a familiar sight over the years, especially when he was rallying against motorcycle clubs. Jake could almost hear the senator's voice from last year's TV debate. These motorcycle gangs are a menace to our society. They represent everything that's wrong with our streets. We must take a harder stance against these criminals. The word criminals echoed in Jake's mind. He'd heard it so many times before, but it stung differently now. He wasn't a saint. He'd had his share of troubles, but he wasn't the monster the senator made his kind out to be. The irony wasn't lost on him. The one time he'd done something genuinely good, it had landed him right where Wheeler always said he belonged, behind bars. Running his fingers through his disheveled hair, Jake remembered the newspaper headlines from last month. Senator Wheeler pushes for stricter laws against motorcycle clubs. The article had detailed Wheeler's proposed legislation that would give police broader powers to arrest club members on suspicion alone. Jake's brothers in the club had been furious, but they'd kept their heads down, trying not to give Wheeler more ammunition. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Jake shifted on the bench. His leather vest felt heavy on his shoulders, the club patches that usually gave him a sense of belonging now feeling like targets on his back. Every time Wheeler needed a boost in the polls, he'd point to the Hells Angels as public enemy number one. It was an easy way to score political points, paint them all as thugs and criminals. And now here he was, tangled up with Wheeler's daughter, of all people. Jake closed his eyes, remembering Lily's face in the hospital room. She had her father's determination, that same unwavering certainty in her beliefs. But unlike her father, she'd shown vulnerability in those moments by the roadside, a human connection that had felt real. "Your father really did a number on you, didn't he?" Jake muttered to himself, thinking of how quickly Lily had dismissed his help in favor of her father's prejudices. The sound of keys jangling down the corridor made Jake look up. Through the bars, he could see the evening shift changes happening, officers swapping stories and coffee cups. Someone was probably calling the senator right now, telling him that a Hells Angel had been arrested in connection with his daughter's assault. Jake could almost picture Wheeler's satisfied smile. The worst part was knowing that this was exactly what Wheeler had been waiting for, proof that his warnings about the Hells Angels were justified. One of them, caught red-handed, attacking his own daughter? It was political gold. Jake's stomach churned at the thought of becoming Wheeler's perfect example, his case study in why motorcycle clubs needed to be crushed. He stood up and paced the small cell, his boots echoing against the concrete floor. The senator's influence reached far beyond just the political arena. Wheeler had friends in the police department, the DA's office, the judges, everywhere that mattered. Even if Jake was innocent, proving it would mean fighting against a system that was already convinced of his guilt. Jake stopped pacing and leaned his forehead against the cool cell bars. Being connected to Lily Wheeler in any way was dangerous enough, but being accused of attacking her? That was the kind of trouble that could destroy not just him, but potentially his whole club. Wheeler would use this to justify every accusation he'd ever made against them, and this time, Jake had handed him the perfect weapon. Jake stood outside Lily's hospital room, his heart pounding against his leather vest. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the empty hallway. A nurse passed by, giving him a suspicious look that he'd grown used to over the years. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door. "Come in!" Lily's voice called out, weak but alert. When Jake stepped inside, Lily's eyes widened with recognition and fear. She reached for the call button, but Jake raised his hands in surrender. "Please," he said softly. "Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Lily's hand stayed near the button, but she didn't press it. Her face was pale against the white hospital sheets, a nasty bruise blooming across her left cheek. "Why should I listen to anything you have to say?" Jake pulled up a chair, but kept his distance. "Because I'm the one who found you. I'm the one who called the ambulance, and I'm the one who stayed with you until help arrived." "That doesn't prove anything," Lily said, her voice hard. "You could have hit me and felt guilty afterward." Jake leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Think about it. If I had hit you, why would I stop? Why would I call for help? Why would I stick around? I could have just kept riding." Lily's expression wavered slightly. "My father always said—" "Your father doesn't know me," Jake interrupted. "He doesn't know any of us, not really. He just knows what makes for good politics." A flash of something, doubt, maybe, crossed Lily's face. She shifted in her bed, wincing at the movement. "Then why were you there?" "I was heading home from a club meeting. Wrong place, right time, I guess." Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I know what you think of me, what your father's taught you to think of people like me. But I'm not your enemy here." Lily studied him for a long moment. The steady beep of her heart monitor filled the silence. "Someone hit me," she said finally. "Someone left me for dead on that road." "And I want to help you find out who it was," Jake said. "Not just to clear my name, but because it's the right thing to do. Because whoever did this to you is still out there." "Why should I trust you?" Lily asked, but her tone had lost some of its edge. "Because right now, I might be the only person who cares more about finding the truth than protecting reputations." Jake met her gaze steadily. "You're a cop. You know how these things work. Someone hits a senator's daughter and leaves her for dead? That's not random." Lily's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe we both want the same thing. The truth, no matter where it leads." Jake stood up slowly. "I'll understand if you want me to leave, but if you want to find out who really did this to you, I'm willing to help." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Lily's shoulders slumped slightly. "I don't trust you," she said bluntly. "But you're right about one thing. This wasn't random." "So?" Jake asked. Lily pressed her lips together, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine. We work together. But the moment I suspect you're not being straight with me—" "I know," Jake said. "You'll throw me under the bus faster than your father can say motorcycle gang." A ghost of a smile touched Lily's lips. "At least we understand each other." Scene 1. The investigation begins. The morning sun filtered through the hospital room's window as Jake spread out a map on Lily's bedside table. 3 days had passed since their agreement to work together, and Lily was finally strong enough to sit up and focus. "Show me exactly where you found me," Lily said, her voice still carrying a hint of distrust. She adjusted her position, grimacing as she moved. Jake pointed to a stretch of highway on the map. "Right here, about half a mile past Miller's Creek Bridge. You were lying face down in the grass, maybe 15 feet from the road." Lily's fingers traced the road on the map, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I was on patrol that night. There had been reports of street racing in the area. She looked up at Jake, her eyes narrowing. Your club wasn't involved in that, was it? No, Jake said firmly, meeting her gaze. We don't do that kind of thing. Besides, I was coming from the opposite direction when I found you. Lily nodded slowly, though Jake could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. I remember pulling someone over, she said, pressing her fingers to her temples. A dark-colored vehicle. After that, everything's blank. Dark-colored isn't much to go on, Jake said. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. But I took some pictures of the scene before the ambulance arrived. Thought they might be useful. Lily reached for the phone, surprised by his forethought. The photos showed skid marks on the asphalt, broken glass scattered across the road, and the disturbed grass where she had been found. The skid marks, she murmured, zooming in on one of the pictures. They show the car was coming from the south, not the north where you came from. Jake noticed her shoulders relax slightly. Think you're strong enough to visit the scene? He asked. The evidence might still be there. I can manage, Lily said, throwing back her covers. Just give me a minute to get dressed. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to the site in Jake's pickup truck. He had traded his motorcycle for something less conspicuous, aware that being seen with Senator Wheeler's daughter could cause problems for both of them. Lily moved slowly, using a cane for support as they walked the shoulder of the road. The morning dew still clung to the grass, making their shoes wet as they searched the area. The skid marks are still visible, Jake pointed out, walking along the dark streaks on the pavement. Driver hit the brakes hard before impact. Which means it wasn't premeditated, Lily said, her police training kicking in. They didn't expect to hit anyone. Jake moved toward the grass where he had found her. Something caught his eye, a glint of red plastic partially buried in the dirt. He knelt down and carefully dug it out. Lily, he called, come look at this. She made her way over, leaning heavily on her cane. In Jake's palm lay a piece of shattered tail light, its red plastic distinctive and clearly expensive. That's high-end, Lily said, taking the piece from him. Custom made. I've worked enough traffic accidents to know this isn't from any standard vehicle. Jake stood up, brushing dirt from his jeans. I know most of the garages around here. We could check which ones handle custom work. Lily turned the piece over in her hands, studying it carefully. I've already checked the vehicle registration database. None of the cars in this county have this type of taillight assembly. So either the car isn't local, Jake said, or someone's hiding it. Exactly. Lily pocketed the fragment, her expression thoughtful. Maybe you're not completely useless after all. Jake smiled slightly, recognizing the small olive branch for what it was. High praise from a Wheeler. The paper trail. The police station's records room felt cramped and stuffy. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls, and the smell of old paper filled the air. Jake sat at a small desk, flipping through accident reports while Lily accessed the digital database on a worn computer terminal. Here's something, Lily said, leaning closer to the screen. Her shoulder brushed against Jake's as he moved to look. The night I was hit, there was a fundraising event at the country club. Guest list includes half the city council. Jake spread out the physical reports on the desk. Any of them drive fancy cars with custom tail lights? Most of them, Lily sighed, scrolling through vehicle registrations. But none match our fragment exactly. She rubbed her temples, frustration evident in her gesture. Jake noticed her discomfort. Maybe we should take a break. You're still recovering. I'm fine, she snapped, then softened her tone. Sorry, it's just... something isn't adding up. Jake pulled another file from the stack. Look at this. 3 weeks ago, Councilman Peterson reported his car stolen, a black Mercedes with custom modifications. Lily's fingers flew across the keyboard. Peterson. He's been pushing hard for my father's anti-gang legislation. The same legislation that would give police broader powers to shut down motorcycle clubs, Jake added, his jaw tightening. They exchanged glances, the implications hanging in the air. Lily pulled up Peterson's case file, but the screen flickered and displayed an error message. "That's weird," she muttered, trying again. "The file's been corrupted." Jake leaned in, pointing to a notation on the physical report. "Look here. The investigating officer was Detective Morris. Isn't he your father's friend?" "Yeah," Lily said slowly. "He's been to our house for dinner dozens of times." She tried accessing other files related to Peterson, but each attempt met with the same error message. Jake stood up and walked to the filing cabinet marked Vehicle Theft, Current Year. He pulled the drawer open and rifled through the folders. Peterson's original theft report should be in here, but let me guess, it's missing? Jake nodded grimly. Someone's gone through a lot of trouble to bury this. Lily pushed back from the computer, her face pale with anger. "We need to talk to Peterson." "Already tried," Jake said. "Called his office while you were checking the database. His secretary says he's out of town at a conference." "Convenient," Lily muttered. She pulled out the tail light fragment from her pocket, turning it over in her hands. "We know this came from an expensive car. We know Peterson's car was allegedly stolen right before I was hit. And now we know someone's tampered with the records." "But we can't prove any of it," Jake finished. He gathered the scattered reports, carefully returning them to their original order. "Without access to those corrupted files, or Peterson's original theft report, we're stuck," Lily concluded, her shoulders slumping. She looked at Jake, and for the first time, he saw vulnerability beneath her tough exterior. "Someone really doesn't want us looking into this." Jake began returning the files to their cabinets. "So, what now?" "Now," Lily said, pushing herself up from the chair with effort, "we need to find another angle. Someone has to know something about Peterson's car." They left the records room, carefully locking it behind them. Both felt the weight of their discovery, and their frustration at not being able to do anything about it. The evidence was there, but just out of reach, like a shadow disappearing around a corner. The missing link. Late afternoon sun filtered through dusty windows at the police impound lot. Jake and Lily walked between rows of damaged vehicles, each step crunching on loose gravel. The air smelled of oil and metal, making Jake's nose wrinkle. "Over here," Lily called, stopping in front of a mangled guardrail. "This is what I hit after the car struck me." She touched the twisted metal gingerly, as if reliving the moment. Jake knelt beside the wreckage, his trained mechanic's eye taking in every detail. "Look at these paint transfers." He pointed to dark smudges along the rail. "Definitely from an expensive car. The paint has those fancy metallic flakes in it." Lily crouched next to him, wincing slightly from her still healing injuries. "Can you tell the exact color?" "Midnight blue, maybe black in certain light." Jake ran his fingers along the scrapes. "This matches the taillight fragment we found." They worked methodically, examining every inch of the guardrail. The sun crept lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lot. Jake's leather jacket felt heavy in the warm air, but he didn't remove it. "Wait," Lily said suddenly, reaching for something caught in the rail's twisted metal. "There's something here." Jake helped her pull free a small piece of chrome trim, about 6 inches long. "Good eye. This definitely came off our mystery car." Lily turned the piece over in her hands, then reached for the evidence kit she'd brought. "The surface is pretty smooth. Perfect for fingerprints." Jake watched as she carefully dusted the chrome piece with fine black powder. Her movements were precise, professional. Despite everything, he couldn't help admiring her dedication. "There," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "Look at that." Clear fingerprints emerged under the powder, 3 distinct patterns pressed into the chrome's surface. The person who'd lost control of their car had grabbed the trim during the crash. "These are pristine," Lily said, photographing the prints with her phone. "I can run them through the system right now." She pulled up the police database on her phone, carefully uploading the images. Jake paced while they waited, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. The impound lot had grown quiet, most of the day shift workers already gone home. Only the distant sound of traffic broke the silence. Lily's phone chimed. She stared at the screen, her face going pale. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible." Jake moved to her side, looking over her shoulder at the display. The database had found a match, complete with a photo ID and full name. Connor Wheeler, the senator's son. Lily's hands shook as she gripped the phone. "My own brother," she said, her voice barely audible. "Connor's fingerprints are on the car that hit me." Jake stood very still, watching emotions play across Lily's face. Shock, denial, anger, betrayal. The piece of chrome trim lay forgotten on the ground between them, the fingerprints now telling a story neither of them had expected. "I knew Connor was ambitious," Lily said, more to herself than to Jake. "But to try to kill his own sister?" Jake picked up the chrome piece carefully, wrapping it in a clean evidence bag. "We've got him now. These prints prove he was there that night." But Lily's expression had turned hard, her police training taking over despite the personal betrayal. "We need more," she said. "Connor will claim he was there after the fact, trying to help. We need to prove he was driving." The sun had nearly set now, casting long shadows across the impound lot. They had their first real break in the case, but it had come with a bitter price. Lily's own brother had tried to kill her, and they both knew this was just the beginning of an even darker truth. Scene 1. The meeting. The cafe buzzed with afternoon activity as Jake and Lily waited at a corner table. Late summer sunlight streamed through large windows, casting warm patches across the polished wood floor. Jake fidgeted with his coffee cup, feeling out of place in his leather jacket among the business lunch crowd. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, watching Lily check her phone for the 10th time. Lily nodded, her jaw set firm. "Connor won't make a scene in public. That's not his style." She wore her off-duty clothes, jeans and a simple blouse, but Jake noticed she sat with the same alert posture she had on duty. The bell above the door chimed. Connor Wheeler strode in, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Jake's motorcycle. His confident smile faltered slightly when he spotted Jake sitting with his sister. "Lily," Connor said, pulling up a chair. "I didn't realize you'd be bringing company." He glanced at Jake with barely concealed disdain. "Cut the act, Connor," Lily said, her voice low but sharp. "We found your fingerprints on evidence from the night I was hit." Connor's expression didn't change, but Jake noticed his hands tighten slightly on the table's edge. "What are you talking about?" "Chrome trim piece," Jake said, meeting Connor's gaze. "From the car that ran your sister off the road. Your prints were all over it." A waitress approached their table, but Connor waved her away with a practiced smile. He leaned back in his chair, straightening his tie. "Of course my prints were there. I arrived right after the accident happened." "What?" Lily's eyes narrowed. "You never told me you were there that night." "I was driving home from a campaign fundraiser," Connor said smoothly. "Saw the emergency vehicles and recognized your patrol car. I stopped to check on you, but the paramedics were already loading you into the ambulance." Jake watched Connor's face carefully. The man was good. His story came out natural and easy, like he was discussing the weather. Too easy. "That's convenient," Jake said. "Why didn't you come to the hospital?" "I did, actually." Connor's smile turned sympathetic. You were unconscious, sis. I spoke with your doctor and left once I knew you were stable. Had an early meeting the next morning I couldn't miss. Lily pulled out her phone, thumbing through files. There's no record of you visiting the hospital that night. Must be a clerical error. Connor shrugged. I can get statements from people at the fundraiser confirming I was there until 10. The accident happened around 11, right? Plenty of witnesses saw me leaving the event. Jake felt his frustration rising. Connor had an answer for everything, delivered with perfect political polish. But something in the man's eyes, a hint of satisfaction, maybe, made Jake's skin crawl. Why didn't you mention being there before now? Lily pressed, her voice trembling slightly. When I was investigating the hit and run? Honestly? Connor spread his hands. I didn't think it was relevant. I arrived after the fact, saw you were getting medical attention, and followed up at the hospital. What else could I add to the investigation? A tense silence fell over the table. Jake could see doubt creeping into Lily's expression. Connor's alibi seemed solid, but Jake had known enough liars in his life to recognize when someone was performing rather than telling the truth. Connor checked his watch, a flashy piece that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Look, I have another meeting to get to. I'm sorry I couldn't be more help, but I'm sure you'll find whoever did this. He stood, adjusting his suit jacket. Take care, sis, Mr. He paused, deliberately not remembering Jake's name, then walked away without finishing the sentence. Jake and Lily sat in her small apartment, surrounded by stacks of newspapers and campaign materials. The evening light cast long shadows across the cluttered coffee table as they pieced together Connor's recent activities. Look at this, Lily said, pushing a newspaper article toward Jake. The headline read, Wheeler Dynasty. Senator's son announces bid for city council. She traced her finger along the text. This was published 3 days before the hit and run. Jake leaned closer, his leather jacket creaking. Your brother's running for office? Not just any office. Lily's voice was tight. He's going for the same district where I work as an officer, where the attack happened. Jake rubbed his chin, connecting the dots. A cop getting attacked in his district. Would make the area look unsafe, Lily finished. Perfect timing for someone promising to clean up the streets. She stood up and started pacing, her hands clenched. Connor's whole campaign is built around law and order. What better way to prove his point than having his own sister become a victim? Jake watched her move back and forth, seeing the pain of betrayal in every step. We need more than speculation, Lily. Your brother's got his alibi locked down tight. Lily stopped suddenly, her eyes widening. The dash cam. What? My patrol car's dash cam. She rushed to her laptop. It would have been recording that night. I never thought to check it because... She paused, looking embarrassed. Because I was so sure you were involved. Jake moved to stand behind her as she logged into the police database. Can you access it from here? The files are automatically uploaded after each shift. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Here it is. The video showed a dark stretch of road, illuminated only by headlights. Lily's voice came through, calling in her location for a routine patrol. Then headlights appeared in the rear view, growing brighter. There, Jake pointed. The car that hit you. They watched as the vehicle swerved toward Lily's patrol car, forcing her off the road. The crash itself happened off camera, but the audio continued recording. Through the static and noise, they heard something that made them both freeze. A car door opened. Footsteps approached. Then, clear as day, Connor's voice. Sorry, sis. Nothing personal. Just politics. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. Jake placed a steadying hand on her shoulder as they listened to the sound of the car driving away, leaving Lily unconscious on the roadside. That's why he was so ready with his alibi, Jake said quietly. He knew exactly when it happened because he was there. Lily's shoulders trembled under his hand. My own brother. She took a deep breath, straightening up. We need to make a copy of this right now. Connor has friends in the department. This recording could disappear if we're not careful. Jake watched as she transferred the file to a secure drive, noting how her hands shook despite her determined expression. The betrayal of family cut deep, but Lily's strength showed in her refusal to look away from the truth. What now? He asked as she finished the backup. Now we take this to someone who can't be bought, Lily said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Someone outside my father's influence. She clutched the drive containing the damning evidence, proof of her brother's calculated betrayal. The recording had changed everything. What started as a simple hit and run had revealed itself as something far more sinister. A calculated political move by a man willing to sacrifice his own sister for power. Jake's motorcycle roared through the evening traffic, with Lily holding tight behind him. The secured flash drive felt heavy in her jacket pocket as they made their way to Connor's campaign office. The tall glass building reflected the setting sun, its polished exterior hiding the corruption within. You sure about this? Jake asked as they parked, his face serious beneath his messy dark hair. He needs to know we have him, Lily said, straightening her leather jacket. Maybe he'll do the right thing if he sees there's no way out. The security guard at the front desk recognized Lily immediately. Officer Wheeler, your brother mentioned you might stop by. Jake and Lily exchanged worried glances. Connor was expecting them. The elevator ride to the 10th floor was tense. When the doors opened, they found themselves in a bustling campaign office. Young staffers hurried about with papers and tablets, barely noticing them. Campaign posters lined the walls, showing Connor's practiced smile and the slogan, "A stronger, safer city." Connor's assistant led them straight to his corner office. He sat behind a massive desk, wearing an expensive suit that seemed to armor him against the world. Two men in dark suits stood by the windows, their stances screaming, "Security!" Lily, dear sister. Connor's smile was cold. And your friend. Please, sit down. We have proof, Connor, Lily said, remaining standing. The dash cam recorded everything, including your voice at the scene. Connor's smile didn't waver. Interesting. Martin? He nodded to one of the suited men, who produced a tablet and played a video. It showed Connor at a charity dinner, giving a speech. The timestamp matched the night of the attack perfectly. But that's impossible, Jake growled. We heard you. Did you? Connor interrupted smoothly. Because according to official records, I was speaking to 300 witnesses that night. The video's been verified by multiple sources. Lily pulled out the flash drive. We have the recording right here. Connor spread his hands. By all means, play it. His confidence made Lily's stomach sink. She connected the drive to Connor's computer and clicked play. Static. Nothing but static. No, Lily whispered. No, this isn't possible. We just listened to it. Computers can be so unreliable, Connor said with fake sympathy. Files corrupt all the time, especially when they're accessed without proper authorization. That could be serious, Lily, accessing police files for personal reasons. Jake stepped forward, his fists clenched. The security men tensed, but Connor waved them back. Let's be reasonable, Connor continued. These wild accusations, they could hurt a lot of people. Your career, Lily, your friend's freedom. After all, Hell's Angels don't have the best reputation with law enforcement. You're threatening us, Lily said, her voice shaking with anger. I'm being practical. Politics is about perception, sister. Right now, you're a brave officer who survived a tragic accident. Wouldn't it be better to leave it at that? Jake and Lily stood in stunned silence, watching as Connor casually shuffled some papers on his desk. The weight of his influence pressed down on them like a physical force. Every angle they might try had been anticipated and blocked. "Now, if you'll excuse me," Connor said, "I have a fundraising dinner to prepare for. Martin will show you out." He turned to his computer, dismissing them completely. As they were escorted to the elevator, Lily's shoulders slumped. The recording was gone. Connor's alibi was bulletproof, and they'd just been shown exactly how much power they were really up against. The doors closed on Connor's world of influence and corruption, leaving them alone with the crushing realization that this fight was far bigger than they'd imagined. Chapter 13. The Power of Politics. Jake slammed his fist against the brick wall outside Connor's campaign building. The rough surface scraped his knuckles, but he barely noticed the pain. Lily paced nearby, her phone pressed to her ear as she tried one last time to reach her contact at the police department. "Nothing," she said, shoving the phone into her pocket. "Detective Roberts won't even take my call anymore." The evening had turned chilly, and the streetlights cast long shadows across their faces. Jake watched as campaign workers filed out of the building, chattering about their upcoming victory party. Everything seemed so normal to them, so uncomplicated. "We need to try something else," Jake said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Maybe if we go back to the accident scene? And look for what?" Lily's voice cracked. "Connor's destroyed the recording. He's got witnesses placing him across town. Even the physical evidence we collected." She trailed off, remembering how quickly it had been dismissed as inadmissible. They walked to a nearby diner, seeking warmth and a quiet place to think. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as a tired waitress brought them coffee. Neither touched their cups. "Your father's influence runs deeper than we thought," Jake said quietly, watching people pass by outside the window. "Every door we try is already closed before we reach it." Lily's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her face went pale. "Speaking of my father." She turned the phone so Jake could see. A news alert showed Senator Wheeler standing at a podium, his face grave as he addressed reporters. The headline scrolled across the bottom. "Senator Wheeler addresses daughter's recent behavior." They watched in horror as the senator's words scrolled across the screen. "While I understand my daughter's trauma following her accident, her recent actions, including associating with known criminal elements, are concerning. We believe she may be suffering from post-traumatic stress and possibly confusion from her head injury." "He's trying to discredit you," Jake said, his voice low with anger. "Both of us," Lily corrected, reading further. "Listen to this. The individual in question, a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang, has a history of anti-establishment behavior. We have reason to believe he may be manipulating my daughter's vulnerable state for his own agenda." More notifications began flooding Lily's phone. Colleagues, friends, even her partner at the precinct, all sending messages asking if she was okay, if she needed help, if she was thinking clearly. "They're painting me as unstable and you as a criminal mastermind," Lily said, switching her phone off in disgust. "No one's going to believe anything we say now." Jake watched as news vans began pulling up outside the diner. Someone must have recognized them through the window. "We need to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table. They slipped out the back door just as reporters started pouring in through the front. Jake led them through alleyways until they reached his motorcycle, parked several blocks away. "My father's made his move," Lily said, her voice hollow. "He's using everything he has, his influence, the media, my own reputation as a cop, to shut us down." Jake started his bike, the engine's rumble matching the storm of emotions in his chest. "Where to?" Lily looked back toward the city center, where the lights of her father's office building touched the clouds. Everything she'd worked for, her career, her credibility, it was all being stripped away by the very people she should have been able to trust most. "Somewhere quiet," she said, climbing on behind Jake. We need to rethink everything. They rode off into the night, leaving behind the growing media circus and the weight of the senator's words. For now they had no choice but to retreat and regroup, knowing that the truth they fought for was slipping further away with each passing moment. Jake stared at his half-packed duffel bag on the motel bed. The neon sign outside his window flickered, casting an unsteady red glow across the worn carpet. His leather jacket lay draped over a chair, the Hells Angels patch catching the light. Everything he owned could fit in that bag, the life of a man always ready to move on. The TV droned in the background, another news report about Senator Wheeler's troubled daughter and her dangerous associations. Jake clicked it off, unable to stomach any more of the lies. He stuffed another shirt into the bag, trying to convince himself this was the right choice. A knock at the door made him freeze. Through the thin curtains, he could make out a familiar silhouette. "I know you're in there, Jake," Lily called out. "Open up." He hesitated, then walked to the door. Lily stood there, wearing civilian clothes instead of her uniform, her badge notably absent. Dark circles under her eyes matched his own. "Planning to run?" she asked, pushing past him into the room. Her eyes landed on the duffel bag. "It's better this way," Jake said, closing the door. "Your father's turned the whole city against us. Maybe if I'm gone, you can salvage what's left of your career." Lily picked up his leather jacket, running her fingers over the patch. "Is this what you do? When things get tough, you just ride away?" "This isn't about being tough," Jake argued, pacing the small room. "Your father's got the media, the police, even your own colleagues believing his story. We're fighting a losing battle." "Since when does a Hell's Angel back down from a fight?" Lily challenged, tossing his jacket at him. "The Jake I've gotten to know over the past few days wouldn't give up just because some politician made things difficult." Jake caught the jacket, the familiar weight of it in his hands. "Your brother tried to kill you, Lily. Your father's covering it up. These people, they've got power we can't touch." "That's exactly why we can't stop," Lily said, her voice firm. She pulled something from her bag, a small USB drive. "Remember that security camera near the accident site? The one that mysteriously malfunctioned that night?" Jake nodded, his attention caught. "Well, it turns out the data wasn't completely erased. I have a friend in IT who might be able to recover it." She held up the drive. "But I need your help. We can't trust the system anymore. We need to work outside it." Jake set his jacket down, hope stirring in his chest despite his attempts to squash it. "Your father's people will be watching every move you make." "Then it's a good thing I've got a partner who knows how to operate in the shadows," Lily said with a slight smile. "Unless you're still planning to run?" Jake looked at his half-packed bag, then back at Lily. She stood there, determined and unbroken despite everything she'd lost. Her career, her family's trust, her reputation, all sacrificed in the pursuit of truth. He walked to the bed and upended the duffel bag, clothes spilling onto the mattress. "Your brother needs to answer for what he did," he said, "and your father needs to learn he can't buy the truth." "So you're in?" Lily asked. Jake picked up his leather jacket and slipped it on, feeling its familiar comfort. "I'm in. But we do this smart. No more playing by their rules." Lily's relief was visible as she nodded. "We'll find a way to expose them, even if we have to tear down every wall they've built to hide behind." Scene 1. The fluorescent lights of the all-night diner buzzed overhead as Jake and Lily hunched over a laptop in a corner booth. Their coffee had gone cold hours ago, but neither noticed. On the screen, grainy security footage played on a loop. "There," Lily pointed, her finger tapping the screen. "That's Connor's car entering the parking garage at 9:15 p.m. The timestamp matched the night of her attack. Jake leaned closer, studying the black luxury sedan. but his alibi puts him at the charity dinner until midnight. Exactly. Lily pulled out her notebook, flipping to a page filled with hastily scribbled times and locations. The dinner was across town. There's no way he could have been in both places. The waitress approached their table, coffee pot in hand. Jake casually closed the laptop as she topped off their cups. They'd learned to be careful. Connor's influence reached far. Once the waitress moved away, Lily continued in a low voice. My IT friend managed to recover more than just the garage footage. Look at this. She produced several printed bank statements from her bag. Jake's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. These are from your brother's private account? Multiple accounts, Lily corrected, spreading the papers across the table. All receiving large deposits from shell companies in the weeks leading up to the attack. Jake grabbed a pen and started circling dates. These match up with your father's campaign events. Every time he made a public appearance condemning the Hells Angels. Connor received another payment, Lily finished. He wasn't just trying to discredit me, he was orchestrating the whole anti-biker campaign. The pieces were starting to fit together. Jake pulled out his phone, showing Lily a series of text messages from his contacts. My friends have been tracking Connor's movements. He's been meeting with some serious players, gang leaders, corrupt cops, even a few judges. Building his power base, Lily muttered, her face hardening. Using Dad's influence to create his own network. They worked through the night, connecting evidence and building their case. Jake's connections in the motorcycle community proved invaluable, providing details about Connor's secret meetings that no official investigation would have uncovered. Around dawn, Lily sat back, rubbing her tired eyes. We've got proof of bribery, conspiracy, and attempted murder. But we still need something concrete to link him directly to my attack. Jake stared at his coffee cup, thinking. What about the mechanic who worked on Connor's car the day after your attack? What mechanic? One of my brothers spotted Connor's sedan at a chop shop on the east side, the kind of place that doesn't ask questions and doesn't keep records. Lily's eyes lit up. If we can find the mechanic, we might get proof that Connor's car was damaged in the hit and run, Jake finished. They gathered their evidence, carefully organizing everything they'd discovered. The stack of documents, photos, and witness statements painted a clear picture. Connor Wheeler had orchestrated not just an attack on his sister, but a complex scheme to advance his own political ambitions. He never expected anyone to dig this deep, Lily said, her voice filled with determination. He thought his name and money would protect him. Jake reached across the table, squeezing her hand. That's why we're going to win. He underestimated both of us. The morning sun streamed through the diner's windows as they packed up their evidence. For the first time since the attack, they weren't just following hunches. They had real proof, a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to Connor's door. Chapter 17. Confrontation at Dawn. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Capitol building's marble steps as Jake and Lily sat in his parked motorcycle, going over their plan one final time. The evidence was secured in Lily's leather briefcase: bank statements, security footage, and sworn statements from witnesses who had seen Connor's involvement in the hit-and-run scheme. Are you sure about this? Jake asked, his voice gentle. Despite everything they'd uncovered, he knew confronting her father wouldn't be easy for Lily. She clutched the briefcase tighter, her knuckles white. He needs to know the truth about Connor, about everything. Her voice trembled slightly, but her jaw was set with determination. They watched as early morning staffers hurried up the steps, coffee cups in hand, preparing for another day of political maneuvering. The senator's office would be opening soon. Jake studied Lily's face, noting the dark circles under her eyes from countless sleepless nights spent gathering evidence. Your father won't take this well, Jake said, adjusting his leather jacket. He'd traded his usual Hell's Angels vest for something more presentable, though he knew his tattoos and rough appearance would still draw suspicious looks. "Dad spent years building his reputation," Lily replied, smoothing her police uniform. She'd insisted on wearing it, wanting to remind her father of who she was, not just his daughter, but a sworn officer of the law. Finding out his son orchestrated an attack on his own sister, it'll destroy him. They climbed off the motorcycle, and Jake noticed Lily's slight wince. Her injuries from the hit and run hadn't fully healed. Without thinking, he offered his arm for support. To his surprise, she took it. The marble halls echoed with their footsteps as they made their way to the senator's office suite. Early morning light streamed through tall windows, creating patterns on the polished floor. A few curious onlookers watched them pass, the unlikely pair of a police officer and a biker drawing more than a few raised eyebrows. "Remember," Lily whispered as they approached the office, "we need to be calm and professional. No accusations until we've presented all the evidence." Jake nodded, though his heart was racing. He'd faced down rival gangs without flinching. But this, confronting a powerful politician with evidence of his son's crimes, felt more dangerous than any street fight. They were 20 feet from the senator's office when the first security guard appeared, seemingly from nowhere. Then another. And another. Within seconds, they were surrounded by 4 large men in dark suits, their earpieces giving away their profession. "Officer Wheeler," one of them said, his tone professionally neutral, but his stance clearly hostile. "The senator is not available for unscheduled visits." Lily stepped forward, her badge catching the morning light. "I'm here to see my father on official police business." "We have strict instructions," another guard replied, positioning himself between them and the office door. "No visitors without prior clearance, especially—" He glanced at Jake with obvious distaste. "Certain types of visitors." "This is important," Lily insisted, gripping her briefcase tighter. "It concerns a criminal investigation involving Connor." "Miss Wheeler," the first guard cut her off, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This is your only warning. The senator is aware of your investigation. He strongly suggests you drop it, for everyone's sake." Jake felt his muscles tense, reading the threat in the guard's words. He'd been in enough confrontations to recognize when violence lurked just beneath the surface of polite words. The guards formed a tighter circle around them, their message clear. This was as far as they would get. Jake could feel Lily trembling beside him, though whether from anger or fear, he couldn't tell. "Think carefully about your next move," the guard said, his hand resting casually on his concealed weapon. "Some doors are better left unopened." Jake and Lily retreated from the Capitol building, but their determination hadn't wavered. They sat in a small coffee shop across the street, watching the steady stream of people entering and leaving the imposing structure. "We need something they can't ignore," Lily said, stirring her untouched coffee. "Something concrete that even Dad's influence can't make disappear." Jake nodded, his rough hands wrapped around his cup. "Your brother's got to have slipped up somewhere. Nobody's perfect at covering their tracks." Lily's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She showed it to Jake. "Check the impound lot, tonight, Bay 7. Her eyebrows knitted together. "It's from someone inside the department." That evening, they waited until darkness fell before approaching the police impound lot. The security guard recognized Lily and waved them through, though he eyed Jake suspiciously. Row after row of damaged vehicles loomed in the shadows, silent witnesses to countless accidents and crimes. "Bay 7?" Lily whispered, leading the way with a flashlight. Her footsteps echoed off concrete walls. The vehicle they found was a black SUV with diplomatic plates, its front end crumpled. Jake ran his hands over the damage. "This matches the impact pattern from your accident." Lily circled the vehicle, her trained eye catching details. "Look at this," she called, pointing to a partially removed registration sticker. "It's registered to a shell company, but—" She peeled back the corner carefully, revealing another sticker underneath. "Wheeler Foundation," Jake read aloud. "Your family's charity?" They popped the hood, and Lily began searching methodically. In a hidden compartment near the engine block, she found a thick manila envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were documents, bank transfers, surveillance photos, and most damning of all, a series of text messages printed from Connor's phone. They detailed his plan to discredit Lily, viewing her as a threat to his political aspirations. The final message, sent hours before the hit and run, read, "She'll be on patrol tonight. Make it look like an accident." "He planned everything," Lily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He wanted me out of the way so he could position himself as Dad's political heir." Jake placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "This is what we needed. These documents prove everything." They carefully photographed each piece of evidence with their phones, ensuring multiple backup copies. As they worked, a security camera above them blinked steadily, recording their discovery. "We need to move fast," Jake said, helping Lily gather the documents. "Once they realize we found this—" A car engine roared to life nearby, headlights sweeping across the impound lot. Jake pulled Lily behind a nearby vehicle just as a black sedan cruised past their location. "They're already watching," Lily breathed, clutching the envelope. "But it's too late. We have what we need." They slipped out through a side gate, the evidence secure. The dossier contained everything they needed: financial records, communications, witness statements, and irrefutable proof of Connor's involvement in the attack on his sister. As they rode away on Jake's motorcycle, Lily held tight to both Jake and the documents that would finally expose the truth. Her brother's careful planning had been his undoing. He'd kept records of everything, perhaps as insurance against their father. Now those same records would bring his schemes crashing down. The morning sun cast long shadows through the Venetian blinds of Senator Wheeler's office as Jake and Lily stood before the massive mahogany desk. The senator's face remained impassive, though his fingers drummed steadily on the polished wood. "This better be important," Senator Wheeler said, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of a career politician. "I have a committee meeting in 30 minutes. Lily stepped forward, her police badge glinting at her hip. The manila envelope felt heavy in her hands as she placed it on his desk. "It's about Connor, Dad. About what he did to me." The senator's eyes narrowed, darting between his daughter and Jake, who stood slightly behind her, his leather jacket and rough appearance a stark contrast to the office's refined atmosphere. "I thought we were done with these wild accusations." "Not accusations anymore." Lily spread the documents across his desk. Bank statements, text messages, photos. "Connor planned the hit and run. He wanted me out of the way because he saw me as a threat to his political future." Senator Wheeler's face remained carefully neutral as he examined the evidence, but Jake noticed his hands had stopped drumming. The politician picked up one of the text messages, reading it carefully. "These could be fabricated," he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "The documents came from your family foundation's vehicle," Jake spoke up, his voice steady. "The SUV used in the hit and run, it's still in the police impound lot, registered to one of your shell companies." The senator's facade cracked slightly. He picked up another document, then another, his movements becoming more agitated. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter?" Lily asked. "What matters is that Connor tried to kill me. Your son, my own brother, was willing to run me down to advance his career." Senator Wheeler stood abruptly, walking to the window. His reflection showed a man struggling with an impossible truth. "You don't understand the pressure he's under, the expectations. Don't." Lily's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't you dare make excuses for him." The senator turned, his political mask slipping further. He looked at the evidence again. at the irrefutable proof of his son's crimes. His shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of reality finally breaking through his denial. "I've spent my entire career building this legacy," he said quietly. "Everything I've done, every decision I've made, was to secure our family's future. And that's more important than your daughter's life?" Jake stepped forward, his voice tight with controlled anger. The senator looked at Lily, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. He saw not just his daughter, but a strong, capable woman who had nearly died because of his son's ambition. Ambition he had fostered and encouraged. "The evidence is conclusive," Lily said, her voice softer now but no less firm. "You can't make this disappear, Dad. Not this time." Senator Wheeler sank back into his chair, the careful construct of his political world crumbling around him. He picked up the damning text messages again, reading them one more time, as if hoping the words would somehow change. "My own son," he whispered, the words heavy with disbelief. "My own son did this." The office fell silent, except for the quiet ticking of an antique clock. Outside, the bustling sounds of the Capitol building continued, oblivious to the scene unfolding within these walls. Finally, Senator Wheeler looked up, his face aged years in minutes. The practiced political smile was gone, replaced by something raw and real. "What do you want me to do?" The press room of the Capitol building buzzed with anticipation. Reporters filled every seat, their cameras ready, notepads open. The afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, creating a spotlight effect on the empty podium. Jake stood at the back of the room, his presence drawing curious glances from the assembled media. He watched as Lily paced nervously near the side entrance, her police uniform crisp and neat. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Senator Wheeler emerged from a side door, followed by his team of advisors. His usual confident stride was gone, replaced by the careful steps of a man carrying a heavy burden. He approached the podium, adjusting the microphone with trembling hands. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice lacking its usual polish. "I've called this press conference to address a serious matter concerning my family and my office." Camera shutters clicked rapidly. Reporters leaned forward in their seats, sensing the gravity of the moment. 2 weeks ago, my daughter, Officer Lily Wheeler, was the victim of a hit-and-run accident. The senator paused, swallowing hard. "Today, I must inform you that this was not an accident. It was a deliberate act orchestrated by my son, Connor Wheeler." Gasps filled the room. Reporters burst into frenzied whispers, and cameras flashed continuously. Connor's actions were motivated by political ambition and a misguided attempt to advance his own career at the expense of his sister's life. The senator's voice cracked slightly. "The evidence is conclusive and irrefutable. As we speak, Connor is being taken into custody by the state police." Lily stood straighter, her chin high, as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake caught her eye from across the room, offering a subtle nod of support. "For years, I have prided myself on building a legacy of public service," Senator Wheeler continued. "But I failed to see the corruption growing within my own family. My daughter nearly died because of this failure." The senator turned to look directly at Lily. "I owe my daughter's life to the quick thinking and courage of a man I once wrongly judged." He gestured toward Jake. "Despite our past differences and my public stance against his association, this member of the Hells Angels showed more integrity and honor than my own son." Cameras swiveled to focus on Jake, who remained stoic under the sudden attention. Lily's eyes met his again, filled with gratitude and something deeper. "Officer Lily Wheeler has shown extraordinary courage in pursuing the truth, even when that truth led to her own family. She embodies the very best of law enforcement, dedication to justice regardless of personal cost." The senator's voice strengthened with pride. "She is not just my daughter, She is a hero who refused to let power and influence obstruct justice. Through the windows, they could see police cars arriving, their lights flashing. Connor Wheeler was being led out of the building in handcuffs, his face ashen. "I will be cooperating fully with the investigation," Senator Wheeler concluded, "and I offer my deepest apologies to my daughter, to the public, and to those I have wrongly judged. Thank you." The room erupted into chaos as reporters shouted questions, but the senator stepped away from the podium. He walked directly to Lily, and for the first time in years, embraced her publicly. The media swarmed around them, cameras flashing, questions flying, but in that moment, Lily caught Jake's eye once more. He gave her a small smile and a nod, acknowledging the victory they had achieved together. Justice had prevailed, not through political power or influence, but through the unlikely partnership of a police officer and a Hell's Angel who had chosen to do what was right. The morning sun cast long shadows across the police station parking lot as Lily pulled into her usual spot. She sat in her car for a moment, taking in the familiar sight of the brick building where she'd worked for years. Everything looked the same, but she felt different. Officers passing by waved and smiled. Genuine smiles, not the hesitant ones she'd grown used to as the senator's daughter. Through the glass doors, she could see the busy morning shift change in progress. Her heart swelled with a new sense of belonging. "Welcome back, Wheeler," called Officer Martinez as Lily walked into the station. He extended his hand, which she shook firmly. "What you did took guts. Real guts." The bullpen fell quiet as she made her way to her desk. Captain Reynolds emerged from his office, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. "Officer Wheeler," he announced, his voice carrying across the room. "It's good to have you back." Lily nodded, touched by the warmth in his tone. Her desk was exactly as she'd left it, except for a small card propped against her computer monitor. Inside, dozens of signatures and messages of support from her fellow officers filled the pages. "Morning briefing in 5, called the sergeant, and officers began filing into the conference room. As Lily took her seat, she noticed the difference immediately. Gone were the sideways glances and whispered conversations. Her colleagues met her eyes directly, with respect. Captain Reynolds began the briefing, but paused after reviewing the night shift report. "Before we continue, I want to address something. What happened with the Wheeler case has shown us that corruption can hide anywhere, even in the highest offices. But it also showed us that integrity and courage can come from unexpected places." He looked directly at Lily. Officer Wheeler's dedication to the truth, regardless of personal cost, exemplifies what it means to wear this badge, and her willingness to work with someone she initially mistrusted, someone society had taught her to suspect, reminds us all to look beyond our prejudices. Across town, Jake was experiencing his own transformation. The morning news played on the TV at his favorite diner as he sipped his coffee. The waitress, Mary, who used to eye him warily, now served him with a warm smile. "You're quite the hero," she said, refilling his cup. "Never thought I'd see the day when a Hell's Angel would help crack a political scandal." Jake shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention, but appreciating the change in how people saw him. His phone buzzed with a text from his club president. "You did good, brother. Real good." Through the diner's window, he watched people walk past. For the first time in years, they didn't cross the street to avoid him. A mother even smiled as her little girl waved at his motorcycle parked outside. The news anchor's voice drew his attention back to the TV. "In the wake of the Wheeler scandal, reforms are being proposed to address political corruption and police oversight. Senator Wheeler's resignation has sparked a broader conversation about accountability in public office." Jake's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Lily. "First day back on patrol. Thank you for helping me find the truth. You changed everything." He smiled, feeling the weight of years of being judged and misunderstood finally lifting from his shoulders. He wasn't just the tough guy in leather anymore. He was someone who'd stood up for what was right, someone who'd helped expose the truth. As he paid his bill and headed out to his bike, Jake noticed his reflection in the diner's window. He looked the same. Leather jacket, boots, the patches of his club proudly displayed. But like Lily, he felt different. His actions had helped bring down corruption at the highest level, and now he could walk tall, knowing he'd done something that mattered. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as Jake's motorcycle rumbled to a stop at Riverside Park. Lily was already there, sitting on a wooden bench overlooking the water. She'd changed out of her police uniform into jeans and a comfortable sweater, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in weeks. Jake settled beside her on the bench, the leather of his jacket creaking softly. For a while, they just sat in comfortable silence, watching the river flow past. The evening air carried the scent of autumn leaves and distant wood smoke. "You know," Lily said finally, running her fingers through her hair, "a month ago, I would have arrested someone like you on sight." She glanced at him with a small smile. "Now look at us." Jake chuckled, the sound low and warm. "And I would have run if I saw a cop coming." He leaned back, stretching his legs out. Funny how things work out. A family walked past them on the path, the parents holding hands while their young daughter skipped ahead. The mother gave them a friendly wave, showing no concern at the sight of a police officer and a Hell's Angel sitting together. "Everything's different now," Lily mused, watching the family disappear around a bend. "At work, they actually see me for who I am, not just as the senator's daughter. Dad's reputation isn't hanging over me anymore." "Must be nice," Jake said softly, "being free of other people's expectations." Lily turned to face him. "What about you? How are things with your club?" Jake picked up a fallen leaf, twirling it between his fingers. "Better than I expected. Some of the guys give me grief about working with a cop, but mostly they're proud. We've always said we're about brotherhood and doing what's right. Now we proved it." The setting sun cast long shadows across their faces as they sat there, each lost in their own thoughts. A cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying away the last warmth of the day. "I keep thinking about that night," Lily said quietly. "When you found me on the road, you could have just kept riding." "No," Jake shook his head. "I couldn't have." "Why not?" Jake was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because sometimes life gives you a chance to be the person you always wanted to be. That night, I chose to be someone better than my reputation." Lily reached over and squeezed his hand briefly. "You were already better. You just needed the chance to show it." The streetlights began flickering on along the park path, creating pools of warm light in the growing dusk. In the distance, a church bell chimed 8 times. "I should head home," Lily said, standing up and stretching. "Early shift tomorrow?" Jake nodded, rising to his feet. "Yeah, I've got a club meeting to get to." They walked together to the parking lot where Lily's car and Jake's motorcycle waited side by side. The contrast between the police-issue sedan and the custom Harley made them both smile. "Thank you," Lily said suddenly, her voice sincere. "Not just for that night, but for everything after, for believing in the truth as much as I did." "Thank you for giving me a chance to prove who I really am," Jake replied, his usual gruff tone softened with emotion. Lily turned toward her car, keys jingling in her hand. Jake swung his leg over his motorcycle, the engine rumbling to life beneath him. They exchanged one last look, acknowledging everything that had changed between them and within themselves. Chapter 22. The Aftermath. Scene 2. Jake stood in front of his bathroom mirror, wiping away the steam from his morning shower. The familiar face that stared back at him somehow looked different now. His eyes, usually hard and guarded, held a warmth he hadn't seen in years. The weight of his past, the fights, the accusations, the assumptions people made about him, felt lighter on his shoulders. Moving to his small kitchen, he started his morning routine. But even that felt changed. The coffee maker gurgled as he glanced around his apartment. What had once felt like just a place to crash now felt more like a home. Photos hung on the walls, new ones, including a newspaper clipping about the Wheeler case, with his name mentioned not as a suspect, but as a key figure in uncovering the truth. His phone buzzed with messages from the club. Instead of the usual calls to arms or warnings about rival gangs, they were planning a community outreach event. Jake smiled, remembering how his brothers had started looking at him differently after the Wheeler case. Some had even started following his lead, finding ways to help the community rather than intimidate it. The morning sun streamed through his window as he settled into his favorite chair, the leather worn smooth from years of use. His vest hung nearby, the patches and emblems catching the light. Once, they had been his whole identity. Now they were just part of who he was, not all of him. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Opening it, he found Lily standing there, holding 2 paper cups from the local coffee shop. "I brought reinforcements," she said with a smile, holding up the cups. "Though I see you've already got some brewing." "Never turn down good coffee," Jake replied, stepping aside to let her in. He noticed she was wearing civilian clothes, jeans and a casual blazer, rather than her uniform. Lily walked in, taking in the apartment with curious eyes. "This is nice," she said, genuine appreciation in her voice. "Different from what I expected." "Let me guess. You thought it'd be all motorcycle parts and empty beer bottles?" She laughed, setting the coffee cups down on his small kitchen counter. "Maybe, but I should know better by now than to make assumptions about you." Jake leaned against the wall, watching as she moved around his space with comfortable familiarity. It struck him how natural it felt having her there, how far they'd come from that night on the highway. "I was just thinking about everything that's changed," he said, accepting the coffee she offered. "A few months ago, I wouldn't have believed any of this was possible." Lily settled onto his couch, tucking one leg under her. "I know what you mean. Dad called yesterday, by the way. He's actually making changes in his policies, working with community groups instead of against them." "Including the Angels?" "Especially the Angels. Turns out having one save his daughter's life changed his perspective a bit." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes twinkling over the rim of the cup. "Funny how life works out sometimes," Jake mused, settling into the chair across from her. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming the room and casting a gentle glow across them both. "Speaking of life working out," Lily said, setting her cup down, "I've been thinking about the future." The rumble of Jake's motorcycle filled the night air as they cruised down Highway 43. Lily sat behind him, her arms wrapped securely around his waist. The same stretch of road where everything had begun now felt different, almost sacred in a way. The moon hung full and bright above them, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Jake slowed the bike as they approached the spot where he'd found her that night. The gravel shoulder crunched under the tires as he pulled over, killing the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy with meaning. "Strange being back here," Lily said, swinging her leg over to dismount. She adjusted her leather jacket, a gift from Jake after she'd admitted to always wanting one. Jake nodded, propping the bike on its stand. Hard to believe it was just a few months ago. He walked to the guardrail, running his hand along the cold metal. The dent from the hit and run was still there, a permanent reminder of how their lives had intersected. Lily joined him, leaning against the rail. "I was so angry that night," she admitted, shaking her head. "When I woke up in the hospital and saw you, a Hell's Angel of all people, I just assumed the worst." "Can't blame you," Jake replied, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I probably would have thought the same thing in your shoes." He turned to face the empty highway, watching the occasional car pass by in the distance, their headlights cutting through the darkness. "You know what I see now when I look at this spot?" Lily asked, her voice soft but clear in the night air. She didn't wait for his response. "I see the moment my life changed, not because of the accident, but because someone I would have never expected, chose to stop and help." Jake felt warmth spread through his chest, different from his usual tough guy demeanor. "I see the moment I stopped letting other people define who I was," he said. "The moment I realized I could be more than just what people saw on the surface." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars twinkle above them. The night was cool, but not cold, perfect for riding. A gentle breeze rustled through the nearby trees, carrying the scent of pine and wild flowers. "My dad asked me yesterday if I was ever going to transfer to a safer precinct," Lily said, breaking the silence. "I told him I'm exactly where I need to be. This community, these people, they're worth fighting for." Jake nodded, understanding completely. He'd had similar conversations with his club members. "Sometimes the best way to change things is from the inside out," he said. "Show people there's another way." "Like a cop and a Hell's Angel working together to expose corruption?" Lily grinned, nudging his shoulder with hers. "Exactly like that," Jake laughed, the sound echoing across the empty highway. He looked at Lily, seeing not the suspicious, injured officer from that first night, but a trusted friend who'd helped him find his own path to redemption. The headlights of passing cars swept over them periodically, illuminating their faces in brief flashes. Each of them had found something they weren't looking for on this stretch of road. Not just justice or vindication, but a friendship that defied expectations. They stood together at the guardrail, two people who had every reason to be enemies, but had chosen a different path. The night wrapped around them like a comfortable blanket, and the highway stretched out before them, no longer a place of tragedy but a symbol of unexpected hope.